And now, it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Carlos Ghosn, Chairman and CEO of Renault Nissan Mitsubishi, the world's largest automotive group. Mr. Ghosn is also the Chairman and CEO of Groupe Renault and serves as Chairman of Japan's Nissan Motor and Mitsubishi Motors. Mr. Ghosn will be joined by another very special guest, Mr. Bob Duddley, Group Chief Executive of BP. BP, everybody knows, is a global energy company with wide reach across the world's energy system and has operation in Europe, North and South America, Australasia, Asia, and Africa. BP employs around 74,000 people in the world. Also pleased to allow me to welcome Mr. David Barroux, Editor-in-Chief of Les Echos, who will serve as moderator of today's discussion. Please welcome Mr. Carlos Ghosn, Mr. Bob Duddley, and Mr. David Barroux. Welcome. Yes. Welcome. Welcome, David.
Hi, everyone. I'm David Barroux. I'm the editor-in-chief of Les Echos, which is the French financial daily. You're all experts of the auto industry, and you know that this industry is going through a revolution. Every year, every 2 years at the Mondial in Paris, usually we see new cars, concept cars. This year, the real surprise might be what we don't see, what is under the hood, which is the fact that the car industry is going through a revolution, and this revolution is going to be electric. And we thought that it was interesting to be able to talk about this revolution, this industry going through, with two experts of the auto industry and the oil industry. Both of them have been in the same business until the end of the 70s. Just next to me on my right is Mr. Robert Duddley. He's the CEO of BP. He has been CEO since 2010, and he joined one company that was bought by BP in the past, but he has been in this industry since '79. Next to him is Carlos Ghosn, chairman of the Renault Nissan Mitsubishi, so far, alliance, and he has been in the auto industry also since the end of the 70s. He joined Michelin and then Renault in '96. They have seen the past, but they are here today to tell us more about the future and how they both see it. Before we move just to electricity, the future of the car industry, a short introduction that let us know how big your companies are. What you would say the 2 or 3 figures that really describe what is your company today and why you're facing some challenges with this electrification of the auto industry. Bob?
Some numbers. I think most people have heard of, of BP. It's a global energy company, works around 70 countries around the world, but just thinking about numbers, I would say we provide fuel to 8 million customers a day through about 18,500 retail sites around the world, many in Europe. And I think I'll give you another figure we all need to think about. 2 billion more people on the planet in 2050. 1 billion people today don't have electricity. So we've got this, we have to get ready for this dual challenge of lower emissions and more people and fuel needed.
Huge scale. Mr. Ghosn?
11 million cars a year, 457,000 people working in the alliance, 8 billion euro of investments annually. And maybe to come back to what Bob was saying, on the 7.3 billion people living on Earth, let's not forget that about 4 billion of them make less than 800 euro a month, which means they're absolutely today not a customer, even though they are aspiring for mobility. This is something we're going to be talking about.
At car industry show, we see people like you all the time, CEOs of auto company. We don't really see that often, maybe oil companies, and we don't see them together. Why are you on stage together, you think, today? Is it because you need to work together more in the future that you worked in the past?
Well, actually, we do work together. We've got a partnership not only with Formula One, but with lubricants. And we were today visiting, in fact, at Carlos's office with his team, talking about the future of mobility, the need for, and what will be this seismic shift in electrification of vehicles and getting ready for that, and talking about the prospects of, you think of just an oil and gas company that produces fuel, absolutely going to transform the retail sites of liquid fuels and having fast charging. So we were talking about that today, not only about today, but talking about 20 and 30 years down the road. It's very interesting.
Yeah, well, in fact, you're going to see in the motor show less and less car companies, probably more and more other companies, because car makers are becoming more selective in terms of apparition at motor shows. We've seen it in Paris. They're going to be more selective, but they're appearing more and more in consumer electronic show because of the transformation that is touching our products. Back to what Bob was saying, I think we all are looking at the future because we know that most of our offer doesn't exist today. It's not only about the kind of car we're going to be offering in the future to correspond to the prospective needs of consumers and what technology allows us to do, but also because there is an explosion of the services around mobility where car makers are going to play a role, but they will not play a role by themselves. They're going to play a role in partnership with other companies.
You need to be part of an ecosystem more in the future than you were.
Well, I mean, obviously, every company would love to do everything by itself. But this is a natural tendency, and saying something different would not correspond to the reality, except that we can't. So when we understand that we cannot do it by ourselves, we need to enlarge our ecosystem and select the people who are going to be helping you, contributing to the next offer. I mean, with Bob, we're discussing about many opportunities on top of the existing business today around the services around mobility, which, in my opinion, is going to be the high level of growth for the years to come.
For how many years or decades do you think you will still be selling gas, oil?
Liquid fuels. I think the reality is today that it will, when it does eventually peak, which will be sometime around say pick 2030, it will be a long plateau. It's the law of the big numbers, and but it isn't. You can have a long debate about peak oil, but the reality of it is today, renewables is about 3% of the world's energy. It will go up a lot, but electrification isn't going to solve the issue by just moving pollution out of cities and burning coal, for example. Liquid fuels will be there. There's a difference between electrification, which are the electrons which just flow. There needs to be the development of technology to store them. Liquid fuels is a very small, dense atoms of energy that can be moved around in a stable form. So it's going to be both. But in our case, as we were talking about the services, on our retail sites today in the UK, half the people don't buy fuel. They come in and they shop. So we have partnerships with all kinds of people, including retailers, which is why having a consumer point for Carlos and the Alliance's cars there, link up technology-wise of a choice of liquid fuels or electrification. I'm sure that's going to be a big part of the future.
And for you, the traditional car, the cars that we see today, they will be the vast majority of your sales for what? How many decades do you think?
I mean, cars, there is no end to the need for cars. Car as an autonomous transportation device, autonomous and protected, shielded transportation device. I don't think we can see at a certain point in time where we don't need that. We're always going to need it. Now, what is in the car is going to change a lot. I mean, obviously, we used to have a internal combustion engine with mainly a driver which was linked to the machine, hands on the wheel, eyes on the road. That's it. There is nothing else you could do. And we are moving little by little to a mobile, autonomous mobile and connected space where you decide if you want to drive, you want to be driven, and you're going to be able to do a lot of things. And that's one of the reasons for which all the tech companies at different levels are interested into the car, because they see the very important device on which the next revolution, technological revolution, is going to be ending. So we're going to continue to do cars for many years to come, as long as we can see in the future. But the car we're going to do are going to be very different from the one we're doing today. And particularly, we have a great opportunity to develop around the car services that before we were not touching.
But in terms of electrification of the car, how fast is it going to grow? Today, it's like in the energy world Bob was talking about. We talk a lot about
Yeah.
electric cars, but it's still very small.
Yeah.
It's growing very fast, but the base is small, so it's still small.
Yeah.
So what are your projections on the growth of this market, and when will it become maybe a dominant for a car manufacturer?
You said something which, in my opinion, is not correct. You said the revolution of the electric car, it happened. It happened. I mean, what you're seeing now is the unfolding of the electric cars at a speed which is going to be very variable from one country to the other. But no, I mean, the revolution took place 10 years ago when we were the first one to launch it into mass marketing electric cars at reasonable price. This happened 10 years ago. Now it's not anymore a revolution. You don't have one car maker who's not telling you, I'm going to bring electric car on the market. It's over. Now,
Yeah, but you don't sell that many.
no. Yeah, but selling is a different story. Revolution took place. The technology already advanced. Now you're cutting the cost of the battery. You're trying to make the motors a little bit more effective. I mean, that's what you're doing today. But nobody contests the fact that this is going to be a major force of the car industry. And by the way, all the tech company coming to the car industry, they want electric cars. That means the only reason for which they settle with something else is only as temporary. So electric car revolution has taken place. Now you're seeing the unfolding and the mass marketing and the cost reduction. The real revolution that we are preparing now is the connected cars and the autonomous cars. This is what is taking place today. So we are at different phases, you know, we are at different phases, and you have many things happening at the same time. The real tech revolution today is about autonomy and connectivity.
But electricity will be a small...
Now the portion of
yeah.
electricity, if you hear the statements made by all car makers, there are going to be a lot of electric cars sold in the next 3-4 years. Okay, let's be a little bit more realistic. We consider that by the end of 2022, Alliance, our projection is 14 million cars sold. 10% of these 14 million cars will be electric. This is I'm saying electric, not electrified. Electrified is much more. But pure electric car, we're saying 10% of our total sales by the end of 2022 will be electric.
Bob, if in 22, around 10% of the market is electrified, or you have 10%?
It will not be 10% of the market. I'm saying we will. We will. I mean, today we have the leadership of electric cars. So we're going to be a little bit ahead of the market. If we make 10%, the market will not be at 10%, it will be less.
Okay, so let me rephrase. If the market is between 5 and 10%, what does it change for you at your gas station? Will you need to close some pumps and invest in building an infrastructure to charge cars? Is this something that you need to do because the future will be partially, at least, electric?
It could be in some cities. It could be in the cities. There may be more electric cars in the cities, but we would intend to use those retail sites for all kinds of other things. Services, lubrication, working with vehicles themselves. Can I ask Carlos a question? Because so electric and electrified, there's a difference. One of them, one is 100% electric, and others are combinations of liquid fuels and electric together. And which is which?
No, that means today what we put in electric, what we call it's zero emission. I mean, there is no emission. There is no exhaust. Mm-hmm. There is nothing getting out of the car.
There's always.
Yeah, exactly. So what we put in the category of electrified are the plug-in hybrids, which is a derivative of the electric car, and the hybrids, which is more a derivative of the internal combustion engine. Now, the more we are advancing in time, 10 years ago, the hybrid was the big innovation. Today, many countries consider hybrid as no more part of what they are ready to support. They take electric and plug-in hybrid, and they cut it there. So we are moving towards zero emission, step by step. So we move from internal combustion to hybrids, from hybrids to plug-in hybrids, now from plug-in hybrids to electric.
Are you satisfied with the answer, Bob, or you want to follow up?
I actually wanted Carlos to answer. He told me this today. So I wanted to ask for people do get confused about this.
So in this world of tomorrow, for your gas station, I ask you again the same question. Do you need to invest in a special infrastructure that people will be able to charge their cars at your gas station? or should we expect cities to offer that service?
Well, earlier this year, we bought the UK's largest vehicle charging points, was 6,500. So that's around the UK itself, and then we're putting them on our forecourts in our retailing. And but that probably won't have the breakthrough until the technology of ultra-fast charging comes, where you can get down to 7-8 minutes to fuel your car. Today it's still 15 minutes, and consumer behaviors and patterns are different today. But what the breakthrough will come for the cars that the Alliance is making and others when the ultra-fast charging happens.
Under 10 minutes.
So, under 10 minutes. And we're investing with companies who are working on that. You also have to get the standards of the plugs to be more standard among the industry itself and the OEM. So all these things are happening, they're happening fast, and we want to be part of all of it.
The under 10 minutes supercharging mechanism, when will that be available at a cost that is reasonable?
Well, there's some companies doing great piloting work. You can do it. It requires a lot of heat management and safety management. You know, you can imagine the pace and power and the amps flowing through into the vehicle. We're having the right connections there. It's require a lot of physics and a lot of experimenting, but it's coming.
Mm-hmm. If the future is with a different energy mix for the car industry, what kind of impact will that have on your profitability of a company like BP? Will it make the gas station less profitable, more profitable? What does it change?
Well, it's how we will use those retail sites to do lots of things. We talked about last mile of logistics. You're right there in centers, combining with other retail. People buy other things, different on highways. And if you think about gasoline in terms of what we do as a company, I think a liquid fuel is only about 25% of it would be gasoline for cars. It's a lot of other uses of liquid fuels. So we're going to get ready for the future. We make more money selling retailing than we do fuels on our forecourts.
You make more money when people buy a coffee than when they fill the tank?
Yes.
Okay. And for you, Mr. Ghosn, what kind of impact will the rise of the electric car have on your bottom line?
Yeah, well, we obviously this is going to be improving our profitability because we announced in our midterm plan that by end of 2022, the average profitability of the electric cars will be at the average profitability of each company. Okay, so this is by 2022, which means after that it's going to improve. But particularly what's important and what Bob mentioned, because it's the same case for the car industry, we usually make more profit in the services around the product than on the product itself. So it's valid for the energy industry, but it's valid also for the car industry, which means financing of the car, servicing the car, in the future mobility services around the car. We're moving into them not only because we want growth and we want to contribute to this evolution, but also because we see an opportunity to improve the solidity and the financial solidity of each company.
Very often we're told that the electric car in the future will need less maintenance. The traditional car breaks more often. So it's a good business for you. It's a good business for the auto industry in general that you have to go to a garage to have your car fixed and engine checked.
Yeah.
Will that have also a negative impact on your profitability in the future because the cars will be more efficient and
it may have a negative impact if you stand still. I mean, if you do nothing, yes. But you can build your profitability on the fact that you have a product which is less robust. In a certain way, you need to recognize the fact that you're bringing a product which is more robust, where you have less parts, you have less complexity, which means there are certain parts of your business are going to disappear. But obviously, in counterpart, you're going to develop many other aspects which are possible with the electric car that were not possible with the internal combustion engine. So we cannot just squeeze one part of the former business and say, because of this, I'm going to make less money or I'm going to grow less. No. When you bring the electric car, you are shutting down a lot of avenue for revenues, but you are opening up the new doors for revenues and for profit. So obviously, if you bring the electric car and you don't open up these new windows, you're going to be in trouble, which obviously is not the reasons for which we are making all the investments. But the electric car obviously now a lot of car company telling you, we're not very interested because we don't make money, which is normal because this is a nascent technology. You don't have the scale, you don't have yet as many development and as many knowledge that in the internal combustion, but you have a period of time where you need to invest, and this is the cost of doing business. That means after this, you're going to have the reward of being able to enjoy the results of all these investments. Anyway, you don't have the choice because, climate change, the emission regulation, the fact that many governments are taking a very hard stance. I mean, look what the Chinese are doing in China about promoting electric cars and, putting a lot of disincentive to develop internal combustion engine. And this is the largest market in the world. So if you don't look at that and say, okay, the future is through here, and we need to find solutions, your history.
And the biggest reason why electric will be as profitable as combustion engine today is just the scale, the fact that you will be selling more. So economy of scale will make it profitable?
No. The technology, that means when you look at the technology of electric car compared to internal combustion, it's the simplest technology. It's much more simple. Okay? So if you give it time, not only to get scale, but also to be more simplified, because you're spending, for example, the batteries that we do today are much more simple and much more efficient than the one we did 7 years ago. So you can imagine that in 4 years down the road, you're going to have a more powerful batteries, less costly, less cumbersome, less weight. All of this going into the right direction, that you can reduce the cost, reduce the price, and particularly because government are supporting clean energy and particularly supporting lower emission cars, all of this is going to end up into a profitable business model.
Right now, the electric car is very helped by the fact that there are subsidies in many countries. But the car industry in general, the car in particular, is something that the states love to tax. They love to make money out of the drivers. Today, to promote the electric car, they are subsidizing the electric car. But if people move to electric, aren't you afraid that states will simply stop subsidizing and that it will have a negative impact on this growth of what is today a dynamic market?
Well, let's say states are much smarter than that. So basically they give you bonus for the electric car, but they tax other cars. So at the end of the day, I have any doubt that anybody losing money here. That mean, I think, yeah, you have the bonus on electric cars, but there are very few of them. They are taxing and they're putting malus on the other cars. So at the end of the day, the balance is always positive. So when electric cars start to become a majority, which is going to take a long time, you can imagine that little by little, there will be no other choice than electric car or hydrogen car or fuel cells, etc. Then it becomes very normal for the consumers. But for the moment, in order to allow the shift, we know very well that taxation and policies support some technological choices or condemn some technological choices. I mean, if the electric car was not supported today by government, it would just not flourish. But because they are being supported by government, it's going to flourish and gives the industry the possibility to make them a profitable case. I mean, we see this example in many industries.
Mr. Duddley, yes, please.
If I could just add on, you see the same thing with renewable energies. They've been heavily subsidized, but over time now, they're able to stand on their own 2 feet and they're actually profitable. Costs have come down. Could not have happened without the original subsidies, but it's transformed the energy industry. And that's why I think of BP more as an energy company than an oil and gas company. We have a big wind business and biofuels and things like that. We actually make, I think we're the world's largest maker of the lubricants in wind turbines, for example. So we're going to transition many of the things we do over the next 30, 40 years.
In the auto industry, this move to electrification is forcing the industry to invest heavily into new engines, batteries, new suppliers. In a company like BP, oil being such a capital-intensive business, and there is still a lot of need for oil, I guess that most of your investments still go in your traditional oil and gas business, or are you investing more and more also in electrification, or do you think that this should be the job of startups, new players, and if 1 or 2 technology emerge, then you'll buy the players and add them to your portfolio of companies?
We may be a little bit of a special case, but at the beginning of of the century, we has been referred to as going beyond petroleum, invested about $8 billion in solar and wind, and we were too fast. The idea was right. The governments actually didn't support it. The subsidies weren't there, and then it was overbuilt. So we ended up stepping back from that industry. Now we're back into it again in a big way. A lot of it is about timing and pace, and companies have to be really careful with your capital. I tell people if they said, here's $10 billion invest in renewable energy today, I wouldn't know how to do it profitably to make sure there's a shareholder return. So what we do now is spend $500 million a year in the new low carbon energies, and then pace and time and look into ventures. We're talking about some of them together as well, invest in many, many things. And once you are clear about using your shareholders' money carefully, then you move into it.
You have to go fast, but not too fast.
Well, you have to, in our case, that's what happened with us. I mean, the company became known as Beyond Petroleum. We didn't lose any of that expertise, great scientists, great research, and now we're just going to be measured on it. But the electrification of vehicles is no doubt is a huge area for us to get ready for with our services, with our retailing, great partnerships. As Carlos said, you can't actually do it all yourself. You have to have partners to do this.
Today in Europe, and I guess it's the same also in the US, but maybe slightly less, the diesel engine was very popular a few years ago among consumers. It was a cheaper way to fuel the tank and to go further away. Diesel is going down fast, maybe faster than what you expected. What is your view today on diesel, and what does it change for a car company or for oil and gas company?
Well, diesel. The only reasons for which people, I mean, by the way, 90% of the consumer don't care about what kind of engine they have in their car. They don't care. They decide on the car based on the price of the car, the total cost of ownership, the resale value of the car, and in function of that, they go into one direction. I mean, Europe used to have more than 50% of its car industry dieselized. This percentage was 0% in Japan, 0% in the United States.
Just for trucks.
All right. Same car makers, huh? You have the same car makers in Japan, in Europe, and the United States, but 3 different governments. Okay? So the government decide, I want to support diesel, I'm going to give an incentive, I'm going to lower the price, I'm going to run on gasoil, then consumer goes into this direction. Then when the government starts to give signal diesel is not good, we're going to cut the incentives, we're going to stop using diesel cars into the cities, consumer is saying, okay, why should I buy a diesel car to find myself trapped 3-4 years down the road with something which is a big investment for them? So it's not a question of, you know, this is a good technology or a bad technology. We can have infinite debate on it. It's a question that policymakers give orientation to the market. That's it. And consumers who, for 90% of them, don't care about, you know, the technology which is into the car, make their decision in function of common sense. And their common sense is when they hear, you had Anne Hidalgo, you know, the mayor of Paris, saying by 2023, there will be no more diesel cars allowed in Paris. I'm in 2018, I want to buy a car. If I decide to buy a diesel car and I'm going to resell it 5 years down the road, I'm going to be a little bit in trouble in terms of resale value. So it's very simple. That means we don't have to go very sophisticated things. Diesel is condemned because policymakers condemn diesel. For good or bad reason, this is not the objective. And we as car makers, we have to adapt our technology in function of the decision made. So we are lowering down the production of diesels, which all its consequences on the ecosystem, because we're not the only one. Our suppliers are Dutch, et cetera, et cetera. And we are boosting the offer for very efficient internal combustion engine, hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and electric car, because we're going into this direction.
So diesel was above 50% of the market in Europe.
Yeah.
It will be what in 5 years from now, you think?
I mean, obviously you have as many numbers as you have car makers or analysts, but in our case, we are cutting by half the offer in diesels. I'm talking about Renault. Nissan is exiting completely diesel, like most of the Japanese car makers in Europe. I mean, this is the end of it. I mean, we're gonna support as much as there will be cars and niches and segments where there will be demand. But obviously, today the trend is absolutely not in favor of diesel, which was the case 10 years ago, particularly in Europe. So what's very important is not only you need to follow what the technology allows you to do, but at the same time, listen and interpret the political trends, because these political trends are going to determine what technology is going to be winner and what technology is not going to break through.
Mr. Duddley, on the decline of the disappearance of diesel?
So for the same reasons that Carlos said about policymakers, you can imagine the fuel systems of the world. 20 years ago, the refineries were built and designed for more diesel in Europe than in North America. So with the change in policy is a huge impact to make sure that the systems are there to be able to provide the right fuels for gasoline base. In North America, it was simpler, not so much diesel. But in our industry, because of the long lead times of investments, changes in policy are unbelievably capital intensive for us to change, to get ready with new policies and refocus things, just because these refineries are so large.
So how do you see the decline yourself of the diesel in Europe, and what will be the impact on your refineries?
Well, I think we will have to retool the refineries where they are. They're actually pretty good and modernized now. I think we're ahead of that game because this has been clear for some time. In North America, this demand for gasoline continues to rise with good refineries there. So it's the choices we make on capital, and we'll have to spend the capital in response to policymakers.
Electrification is also has pushed new companies, new startups, companies like Tesla, but also smaller players in the industry. When we move to from one type of product to a new generation, it's a revolution, and sometimes the revolution allows new players to emerge, and it's like a new start. For both of your business, are you worried that this transition to or this revolution will, I don't know what to say in English, rebattre les cartes? It will be a new beginning that might challenge some, or not maybe all, but at least some of the traditional actors in your industry?
Yeah, I think you're in trouble when you see the sign of change and you don't act. Now you're in trouble. But when you see the sign of change and you try to understand them and you act on them, I'm not saying it's safe, but I'm saying at least you're not condemned before you start. I mean, we heard many people saying, 5, 10 years ago that car makers are dinosaurs and they're going to all disappear and all the tech companies. 95 million cars are being sold today by the car makers, the same one than 10 years ago, maybe less of them because the consolidation takes place. The newcomers represent probably maybe 100,000 cars on the 95 millions. And they don't make money, which is, for many tech companies, is not an issue. For us, it's an issue. If we don't make money a quarter, I know Bob know exactly what happens to us. So, which is a reality. That means we have to deal with this. That means we have the normal business where you're going to have to deliver on growth, on profit, on free cash flow systematically, and at the same time prepare for the future, you have to invest your cash flow in order to transform your plants, bring the new technology. The startup have an advantage is they don't have the legacy, and at the same time they can raise as much money for the moment as they want from the market, so they don't care so much about P&L. The question is how long this is going to stay. Okay? How long is it going to stay? I personally think, if I have to make a guess, about 5 or 10 years down the road, that because most of the car makers have understood the challenge they have in front of them, they're going to be doing most of the revolution that is taking place. Okay? I may be wrong, but we'll see in 5 or 10 years down the road. I think in most of the industry where the previous tenant of the offer disappeared is because they've been arrogant and they didn't see the signs of change coming, and they did not shift at the right moment toward what's coming. And today the shift is electric, connected, autonomous mobility services. That's it. So if you don't prepare for that, I think you're going to be in trouble. It doesn't mean you prepare for that, you're going to be a winner, but if you don't prepare for that, you're going to certainly be a loser.
Is it the same in the energy world? You're going also through a revolution. Will the same, the big major will be dominating the world of energy in the near future, or will it be the occasion for new players to arise?
So it's interesting you use the word dominate. It's interesting because in oil, if you take the 5 biggest oil companies in the world, they produce only 5% of the oil. So it's about national oil companies primarily. We steward a lot of their research, their resources. But I think when I started in the industry, 79 to 80, the worst thing you could do in a company that was considered an oil company was to find natural gas, because it was inexpensive, there were no markets, it hadn't really moved, it often got stranded or stayed there for a long time. And now, think about it, BP and many of the other companies are as well. We're more than 50% natural gas. So it's always changing, and you can't stand still at all. There's a lot of companies that are not around. So for us, it's not a revolution, it's just constantly changing. And so that's what our plans are to do.
To build your future, you also need talents. And maybe it's a cliche, I don't know if it's true, but it seems that young people today, when they start their life, if they are really, really, really bright, they want to create the startups. If they are really bright, they want to join the startups. And if they are not that bright, maybe they join a big, boring company. It's a journalistic cliche, but I guess there is some truth in it. Do you see that? Do you try to fight that in big companies like yours?
I don't think BP's been boring one day I've been in it. I think I used to worry about that with talent. Today, 1 out of every 5 person in BP has worked less than 5 years. So there's a lot of great young talent coming into the company. Far more people apply now, I think, for companies than the jobs would be. I'm sure it's the same with you, Carlos. I'm not worried about it. We have such talented people wanting to join the company. Now, they may not have the right impression going into it, and then they see the technology that we have, the digitization, it's cliche, AI, and the things we're doing, the ability to seismic image underneath the ground and everything through the system and sensors everywhere. It's a new world. So if I was starting again today, I would really want to go work with an energy company, because the things happening in there are remarkable. No shortage of talent.
You're cool. The same at Renault, Nissan, and Mitsubishi, you think?
You know, usually boring companies are companies where there is no competition. Okay? Yeah, then you can get bored, but we love this situation. I mean, everybody loves to be in a situation where he produces and sells something with no competition. Life is much easier than that. So, unfortunately, it's not the case. Now, about startups, you're right. A lot of young people want to go startup because they look at the successful startup. And they say, okay, I'm going to do like this. But let's not forget the statistics that 90% of the startup end collapsing. 90%. And on top of this, as you know, startup people work much more than in a normal company. They get much less money than a normal company because they are being paid by shares, which may end up valuing 0 if they collapse. So in a certain way, you have a period of time where startup attract a lot of enthusiasm. I mean, I can tell you about this. I have 4 kids, 3 of them have startups, so I know exactly what's going on. So they are very attractive, but frankly, after a while, people little by little try to understand the situation. And I don't think it's a good representation of reality to saying the smart guys go to startup and the guys not so smart go in companies, because it may end up being the reverse. Because if you look at the statistic and what's going on, you may have people being tempted by startup, but a lot of them, at the end of the day, are going to end up into companies which are not going to perform. And then we're going to get people much more mature because they have been through an experience where they value the company much more And in a certain way, they know what makes or breaks a company. So in a certain way, this combination between startups and large company is very healthy, because we are going to end up having a much more mature young workforce.
Have you had to maybe change the culture of your companies a little bit to attract younger talents, or it's not really?
Well, yes, we've got to be open to all these evolutions that are happening and the use of, I'll call it again, digitization, but the use of sensors, the quick analysis of it, the ability to change things. You know, we have people who walk around refineries and chemical plants with 3D goggles instead of used to go up and check valves. Now just look at it and tell the temperature and the pressure, know exactly what to do. I mean, it's almost a science fiction now workforce in many places. So there's great things happening with new technologies, and people want to see it. I will say that this revolution, not just for oil and gas or the automotive industry that's happening with technology, there's another side of it that worries me, because we're able to do so much more today with less people. I don't know what society's answer for that is. I hope there's one out there. But that's where getting talent in the company may not be the issue. It's just how many jobs do we have?
We will have time for a few questions from the audience. So if you want to raise your hand, I see one question in the back over there, and one over here. Yes, please.
2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Shinsaku Toyoshima, TV Tokyo, Japanese broadcasting station. The question to Carlos Ghosn. So now you mentioned the many non-traditional players are entering the car industry. So, and Renault Nissan Mitsubishi Alliance has just opened up the door to the Google tech giant. Could you tell us the implication of that to the car industry? And also now many players from tech giants to Dyson, the UK company, is about to enter the car market. Do you think, is there any possibility that Dyson could vacuum up the Infinity's market?
Yeah. Well, look, first, I don't see a partner as a threat. That means when we, for example, sign a contract with Google to put Android in our car, we did it after a very long discussion and negotiation with them. And in fact, obviously, we have no intention to lose control on our product, and they have the intention to, as much as possible, extend the use of Android. So we found a common ground where we keep the control. At the same time, they can sell a technology which is very useful. And the beneficiary is our user, because our user, we are working more and more on the content inside the car, and tomorrow we're going to be showing some very innovative feature going on. So we don't see partner as a threat. And frankly, a lot of people want to see it as a zero-sum game. If Google is in the car, then Google's gonna take the content. It's not true. We are very careful. We want to continue to have the freedom to build car, assemble car, put functionality in the car the way we want it. But also we know that a connected, autonomous cars with a lot of mobility services around it, we cannot do it alone. We're going to need new partners. We're going to need new suppliers. We're going to need people who are not interested in doing our job, but who are going to be bringing a contribution for the car to be a much better model. And you're going to see more cooperation like this. I'm telling you, that means for the next 12 months, we're going to announce more cooperation like this, all of them geared at making this reality of electric, connected, autonomous, very solid one, where we are the architects, in fact. We see our role as architects, as assembler, not only assembler of parts, but assembler of technology, assembler of information for the benefit of the user.
And Dyson, are you worried about a Dyson car?
I don't want to appear as not paying attention to competition, but frankly, I worry more about my two imminent competitors, which are Volkswagen and Toyota, than about Dyson. I mean, it does mean that I don't worry about them. The question, the main question is, when you say, is Tesla's going to be the name of the future, or is Dyson or somebody else, are the car makers sleeping? Are they napping while the others are moving? It's not the case. It's not the case. We are not. And not only we are not, but we are selecting the right partners and we are moving into the right direction. Not all of us are going to make it. So I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult for newcomers to be able to come with the product and an offer which is stronger than the one who occupy today the market will be able to offer.
We have a question here on the right side.
Yes, my name is Jean-Baptiste Sega from EP Tender, which is a startup. We are developing batteries as a service. And my question is, having in mind that 40 kilowatt hour satisfies 98% of daily usage for any driver, are we ever going to have 100 kilowatt hour in everyone's car? Or would it be better to share the additional 60 kilowatt hour and pay per use attached to the car when needed? And this battery could serve also for storage in the grid to enhance the share of renewables. So that's for both of you, by the way. Yeah. So it's a sort of service which could be added to electric vehicles.
Yeah, we had this discussion this afternoon. In fact, it was about the fast charging system. It was not the same. Fast charging system, I asked Bob, okay, in your opinion, the person coming to the station spend how much time today putting the gasoline into the car? He said about what, 7 minutes? Yeah, 6-7 minutes. So the objective for us is to say we want a fast charging system which competes with the 6-7 minutes, period. We don't need to go to 4 if this means much more investments and much more efforts on this particular part of the technology when we have so many other things to do. So my point to you is, today car makers, I mean, we are flooded with requests of investments. We are flooded by new technology coming our own way. And our most difficult task is how to allocate our capacity to invest in the right technology and how much we should rely on you guys, that means on the startups or on suppliers or on partners to do the rest. Because if we consider all the requests of investment that we are receiving, it's probably 2 or 3 times what we can invest. We cannot do that. So we're not looking at the ultimate technology. We're looking at what do we think is the concern of the consumer. Let's hit this, and then let's move to something else. I give you one example is about the range of the battery. We had infinite discussion about what is the range after which consumers are not going to be preoccupied. Okay? We had a lot of discussion. We didn't have an answer. Now, we have sold already 600,000 electric cars today by the lines. Now, from the 600,000 cars, we know that when you reach 300 kilometers real range is not anymore a concern. But we discovered it by just doing it. So everything we're doing is just to make sure that every battery we put into the car is going to be crossing the 300 kilometer range. Because when we cross the 300 kilometer range, it doesn't anymore appear as a priority in the consumer mind. So answering your question, we are not going to go for peak performance. We're going to go for satisfying what consumers want, because there are so many things we need to introduce in the car that we cannot do everything at peak performance.
Mr. Duddley, just a word of conclusion.
Nothing I can add to that, actually. Nothing I can add.
Just one last question.
Hello,
Very
Mr.
quick.
Ghosn. I'm from China Auto Home. I have a question for China has already become the world's largest electric car market. As a pioneer and a leader in European electric car market, what knowledge and experience can Renault can share to China market, and what's Renault's plans to develop the electric car for China?
You have 1 minute, Mr. Ghosn.
What?
1 minute.
1 minute.
Thank you.
Tonight I'm going to unveil, a little bit later, I'm going to unveil a car that's going to China, which is electric, which is affordable, and in my opinion is going to be a big competitor on the Chinese market. So my question is, I think what the Chinese government doing with the electric car is great. I think we have predictability, we have visibility, we know what they're going, so there are a lot of investments going on. We are partnering with battery makers in China, but we think today that we can improve a lot the offer of electric cars in China, and the response will come from Renault, but also it will come from Nissan and Mitsubishi. We're going to have plenty of cars coming to China, particularly in electric cars.
Mr. Duddley.
Just very quickly, it's very unusual for oil and gas company people to come to an auto show like this. So thank you very much for allowing to be here at the Paris Auto Show. And Carlos, I may speak to Dan Jurgen on your behalf, but why don't you come to a thing called Sarah Week in Houston everywhere, where the oil and gas industry gets together every March? I think it'd be terrific.
Yeah, I owe you that.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup. À bientôt. Merci beaucoup. Well, thank you very much, David. Thank you very much to Mr. Ghosn and Mr. Duddley. I think we all agree that it was a very inspiring moment. And really, thank you very much.